the late 1960s, U.S. forces fighting in Vietnam were encountering strange human-like monsters known as rock apes. And it was at this very same time that the alleged corpse of a creature, one that perfectly matched the description of these rock apes, was put on display in the United States by an Air Force veteran named Frank Hansen. It was called the Minnesota Iceman.
A rock ape and Minnesota Iceman are the same thing in my book. It's exactly the same things that was being described in Vietnam.
Is it possible that one of the monsters reported in Vietnam somehow made its way to North America? For many researchers, the Minnesota Iceman and its connection to the rock apes is one of cryptozoology's most compelling mysteries.
The story of the Minnesota Iceman is cryptozoology gold. People thought for sure that this was the missing link that could help prove the existence of other strange hairy hominoid creatures.
The Minnesota Iceman is one of the strangest sagas in the annals of cryptozoology. On a profound level, what the Minnesota Iceman symbolizes is the possibility that we share our planet with other species of human-like forms. Things that are not quite us, that are very, very different, both physically and behaviorally.
If the Minnesota Iceman was a genuine specimen of an undiscovered primate, the way it was exhibited was highly unusual. The creature was displayed not in a natural history museum or university laboratory, but at carnivals, shopping malls, and supermarket parking lots, as if it were a common sideshow attraction.
It's possible that one of science's greatest discoveries could have been hiding in plain daylight in a sideshow that was being taken around county fairs.
For more than a decade, the traveling Minnesota Iceman exhibit was seen by hundreds of thousands of people and left a lifelong impression on some.
The first time I saw the Iceman, I was about 5 years old. It was mid-1970s, and my aunt paid the admission few dollars to go in. My aunt brings me to where the face was. I jumped up onto the glass, and I screamed, because I came face to face with this horrifying-looking, hairy Neanderthal-type creature frozen in a block of ice.
One of the seminal events in my young life was in the summer of 1976, and I visited the Minnesota State Fair. And so I paid the price of admission and I went in. My first impression of the Minnesota Iceman was that this thing had the general form or shape of a human, but it was obviously not a human. It had a deathly grimace on its face. It was very creepy.
Many who saw the Iceman up close were certain that what they were looking at was a real flesh and blood creature. But was it? And if so, could it have been one of the same creatures that soldiers reported encountering in Vietnam? Or could such monsters also inhabit the wilderness areas of North America? There was at least one person who knew the truth. The man who was in possession of the frozen beast. After retiring from the Air Force in 1965, Frank Hansen made a living exhibiting curiosities such as antique farm tractors at carnivals and county fairs.
He was initially best known for showing the world's oldest John Deere tractor. That was his claim to fame.
Frank Hansen is an enigma. You don't know if he's a carnival huckster or if he stumbled on the greatest mystery the world's ever seen.
Over the years, in his efforts to enchant audiences with the fantastic tale of how he came into possession of the terrifying Minnesota Iceman, Hansen told three very different stories.
Initially, he told people that this thing had been frozen in a 6,000-pound block of ice that was found floating in the North Pacific Ocean, the Siberian Sea, by Russian sealers.
The second origin story Hansen told was that the monster in ice was owned by a Hollywood millionaire who obtained the creature from a warehouse in Asia. The Hollywood millionaire owner smuggled it into the United States and contracted with Hansen to display the hairy enigma for all the world to see.
The mystery millionaire who got hold of the body used Frank Hansen to challenge the theories of evolution. He wanted to exhibit it through Frank Hansen to then see if people might be open to the idea there's still creatures out there like the Minnesota Iceman.
Hansen later told a third and more unsettling Iceman origin story, one that suggests the monster could be living in North America today. In the July 1970 issue of Saga magazine, Hansen wrote an article detailing how he came to obtain the Iceman corpse. Hansen described that while on a hunting trip in Minnesota's Whiteface Reservoir area, he encountered so-called wildman creatures feasting on a deer carcass. He stood stunned and then was horrified to spot another wildman in crouching position. The monster suddenly leapt into the air, let out a loud screeching sound, and charged Hansen. Hansen fired at the monster, killing it.
The idea that Hansen actually shot this in northern Minnesota has a lot of credibility to it because that area has a lot of sightings of a similar creature dating back hundreds of years to the first native people there. Over the decades, dozens of people have come face to face with a creature that they explain looks a lot like the Minnesota Iceman. So I think it's possible Frank Hansen could have shot the Minnesota Iceman up on the reservation land of Minnesota.
In addition to Hansen's 3 conflicting origin stories for the Iceman creature, there was another theory. Although Hansen exhibited his Iceman as the real thing, there were many who believed that the so-called wild man was a fake, a dummy encased in ice. But soon, 2 leading scientists would thoroughly examine the frozen curiosity, and they would reach a shocking conclusion, one that linked back to the jungles of Southeast Asia. In the late 1960s, a monster encased in a block of ice known as the Minnesota Iceman was displayed throughout the United States. A monster that seemed to be an identical match for creatures known as rock apes that American soldiers reported seeing in Vietnam. But was this sideshow attraction little more than an elaborate hoax, a rubber dummy covered in ice? Or was it the real thing?